Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, will the Prime Minister inform the House what new initiatives have been generated to address the emerging crisis affecting scores of vulnerable children who have lost their parents or guardians through the COVID-19 virus over the last 2 years?
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this clearly is a season of exaggeration. However, I simply want to state that there is no emerging crisis as described, and the government is not aware of scores of children in this situation. What we do know that there are instances where children would have lost parents. But in such situations, Madam Speaker, there are provisions in a ministry specifically for family services, because the first line of defense in this situation is the family. If a child has lost his or her parent, if the family finds itself in a situation where it's demonstrably unable to treat with the responsibility that falls on that family, then the Ministry of Family Services will step in and is provided with certain resources to assist such families, Madam Speaker. And that's how this situation is being dealt with. In the event that it goes even further, where a child is in the realm of abandonment, as implied in this situation, then of course we also have the Children's Authority to ensure that that is not a prevailing circumstance, Madam Speaker. We are not without structure.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, given the Prime Minister's response and given the unexpected losses faced by vulnerable families where breadwinners would have passed from COVID-19, leaving children behind, can the Prime Minister indicate whether the government has embarked on or will be embarking on a data collection drive as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on family income streams in particular?
Madam Speaker, all aspects of the effect of the pandemic, and not only on children, but in every single area where the pandemic has impacted lives and livelihoods, would be subject to review and monitoring and extracting of information to assist in the national community being guided, governed, and maintaining some semblance of order with respect to how we respond to COVID, even as the pandemic is still raging.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Madam Speaker, thank you again. Madam Speaker, given the fact and given the response of the Prime Minister, in the event that there may be increasing situations as such, and based on the recent announcement by the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services on the review of grants, can the Prime Minister indicate whether specifically the public assistance and food support grants will be available to families who are in situations as these which may be increasing?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the statements made by the Minister with respect to fraudulent activity in the program of support for the public in this way should bring comfort to the member, because what that does is ensuring that the help that's available gets to persons who need that help. And in the event that the ministry is able to reduce or eliminate fraudulent conduct, it leaves more resources for those who are in need. And yes, if the circumstances develop where this issue becomes an issue requiring the government's intervention, then the government would most certainly ensure that there is help from the public purse. And that is why there's a Ministry of Family Services because this problem will become a family issue, first and foremost.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you. Will the Prime Minister give an update on the state of construction of the central block of the Port of Spain General Hospital?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as a result of issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic, not the least of which is the global supply chain issues that we are all familiar with, and the local health responses, which resulted in successive shutdowns of construction, the UDCOT and the contractors are dealing with a number of issues and differences which have arisen on this project. There are discussions and negotiations on the way, and those should see some sort of resolution to the challenges that arose as a result of what I just mentioned. And I could say at this stage that there's been some loss of time on the project, and what is being discussed now is the impact of that on the costings and the progress as we go forward.
For Orpuch East.
Prime Minister, in light of your answer, could you confirm whether or not Shanghai Construction has indeed terminated the contract with UDCOT and the government for the construction of this pride project, the Port of Spain Hospital Central Block?
I am aware that some threats were laid, but I'm not sure whether in fact the threats were carried out. The contractor was threatening to terminate, and UDCOT had no difficulty with that because the UDCOT is protected by contractual arrangements. However, I do know that there are ongoing discussions between UDCOT and the contractor, and I'm not sure whether the threat or the issuance of a letter of termination is closing those discussions that are underway.
Member for Orpuch East.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, could you indicate what percentage of this project has been completed prior to the threats being made?
No, I could not at this stage, but if the appropriate notice is given in the appropriate time, you can get very accurate information on that.
Member for Orpuch East.
Prime Minister, would you be in a position to say the quantum of monies owed to Shanghai Construction as arising from these threats?
That, if what you're implying is the claim that the contractor is making for payments, I'm saying that it is that kind of involvement that is generating the issue between UDCOT and the contractor. If you're asking as to what has been paid under the contract at face value, then I'm not in a position to tell you that now, but with notice you can get that information.
Member for Orpuch East.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, this is harder than pulling teeth, but could you indicate whether or not those threats also revolve around ongoing issues of mismanagement by the on-site project management company?
Prime Minister.
I have no such information, and therefore I cannot assist the member on that score.
Member for Cuba South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister indicate a timeline to bring legislation to the House to effect the government's stated intention of implementing mandatory vaccination and quasi-safe zone status in the public service?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the government has not stated any intention of implementing mandatory vaccination. That phrase is an interpretation of my colleague from Cuba South and others, and that, of course, they're free to do. The government, through statements made by me as Prime Minister, has publicly stated that the government is engaging in ongoing consultation with respect to creating safe zones or quasi-safe zones, and that assignment has been put into the hands of the Attorney General's office for the necessary legislation to be structured so that there could be legal authority for any such development in the public and private sector. And Madam Speaker, I've also stated publicly that this matter which initially was supposed to have come to a head on the 17th of January. A month's extension had been granted to the Attorney General's office, and we indicated only last Saturday publicly that we're looking towards the middle of February to have the Parliament involved in any such matter. But, Madam Speaker, it's an evolving situation, and we will ensure that we stay on track.
Member for Vancouver South.
Prime Minister, could you inform this House if the government has a written policy which will be shared by all stakeholders and be laid formally in this Parliament in the context of this quasi-safe zone? Because your interpretation is that there is no mandatory vaccination from the government.
Madam Speaker, the government's management of COVID-19 in all its forms and fashion are subject to the documentation that goes to the Cabinet, and that Cabinet shares with the Parliament as and when is necessary and required, and the policy with respect to the creation of safe zones have been outlined by this government and form part of that documentation.
Member for Old East.
Question. Would you indicate whether or not it is the intention of the government to consult with the labour movement and other relevant stakeholders on any legislation, policy or programme to implement this quasi-safe zone?
Madam Speaker, at the very onset, when this matter was raised publicly, the answer to that question can be found in the fact that this matter was placed in the Office of the Attorney General for the express purpose of consulting with all stakeholders, not the least of whom is the labour movement, and I'm advised that those consultations have taken place, are taking place, will take place, with the Attorney General's office being involved. Some persons have participated, others have not, but the door to consultation remains open, and they will take place as they emerge. In fact, Madam Speaker, only last week I spoke publicly about documentation written from Labour to the Office of the Attorney General, the Prime Minister. These matters are ongoing, so consultation is an integral part of the process. It does not necessarily mean that agreement is guaranteed, but certainly consultation is available.
So,
Prime Minister, can you give this House an undertaking that whatever legislation comes before this Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, that public sector workers will not be illegally locked out by the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
I have no idea what you're talking about, because nobody is threatening to illegally lock out anybody.
Member for Karen Central.
To you, Madam Speaker. Will the Prime Minister inform this House of the remuneration of members of the committee recently?
No. Yes, so I thought it was a supplemental.
Okay, sir.
Sorry. Member for Old East.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, before moving away from this matter, could you just, for the benefit of the national community, define what you as head of government understand by quasi-safe zone?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the entire country, and I dare say the world, is under threat through the presence of an invisible microbe that is hurting, killing people, destroying economies, and requiring the attention of all the human population. In Trinidad and Tobago, our very latest position is that we are heavily under the Lambda variant, the Delta variant, and in fact, we are also experiencing the community presence of the Micron variant. With respect to continuing our economic activity to ensure that we have livelihoods, to ensure that there's manufacturing, to ensure that there's socialization, to ensuring that we are understanding that we're living with the virus. We are also saying, Madam Speaker, that there are things that we can do to create some areas that are safer than other areas in the country. It's in that context that certain activities are allowed under certain conditions, because those conditions would be relatively safer than the open society. And that is why, Madam Speaker, we have indicated that the vaccination benefits allow certain things to take place by the vaccinated, while we encourage the unvaccinated to become vaccinated to participate in those benefits. In that context, Madam Speaker, we speak about safe zones or quasi-safe zones, meaning that some areas are better protected than others.
Member for Cuba South, question number 4.
Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister inform this House of the status of the commitment given by the Minister of Finance for the fiscal year 2022, in which he indicated that the security of tenure of nurses employed on contract in the various regional health authorities would have been investigated and finalized by the end of December 2021?
Madam Speaker, this matter is being actively worked upon by the Ministries of Finance and Health. The issue is the inclusion of these nurses in the RHA, Ministry of Health, pension plan. I think that was mentioned by the Minister of Finance at the time, mentioned by my colleague from Cuba South. The number of persons has been established at 3,400, and the cost to the government of including them in the pension plan, currently estimated at being an additional $70 million, is being finalized, and provision is being made for the required increased allocation at the Ministry of Health so as to facilitate the enrollment as permanent employees in the Ministry of Health. The arrangements for the management of the pension fund are also being looked at to find ways and means of improving the return on investments of this pension fund. It is expected that these matters will be sorted out in the not too distant future, because they are attracting the ongoing attention of the government, as I have described.
You inform this House, based on what you have just revealed, if this information has been formally shared with the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association via what we would call bilateral meeting?
That question, Madam Speaker, is a question that I could find out from the Minister of Health as part of the operation of the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance. But as I said, Madam Speaker, the two ministries are working on it, as I have described. Whether they have transmitted that information to the union, I don't have that information, but I'm pretty sure that if they have not done so already, it is imminent.
Member for Carnival Central.
Will the Prime Minister inform this House of the remuneration for members of the committee recently appointed to investigate the factors contributing to the clinical outcomes of the COVID-19 patients?
Madam Speaker, I wish to advise the member for Barata, for Carnival Central, that there are still people in Trinidad and Tobago who will do public service for love of country. And it is not every assignment that someone is asked to do that the major concern is about how much they are paid. As is at this moment, I'm not aware that there's any charge, but in the event that it arises and a stipend is to be paid, the government will happily pay it for the services that we anticipate that they'll provide.
Member for Carnival Central.
To the Prime Minister, through you, Madam, given that there are over 3,000 deaths, COVID-19 deaths, will 1 week be sufficient for this committee to do justice to what is required in this case?
Madam Speaker, given the assignment that the government has placed before these officers, it is reasonable to think that they can do it in the time frame. But I was careful to say, if they need additional time, that time will be provided. There are other people, including our friends in this House, who have been broadening the assignment to all kinds of things. And of course, if that was the initial assignment, then of course 1 week will not be enough. We are concerned with the terms of reference that we've given, And in the event that they are unable to do that in 1 week and they need additional time, then that time would be available to them.
Member for Carney Central.
Can the Prime Minister give this House and the population an assurance that whatever report is generated from this committee, it will not end up like the Roadmap to Recovery report?
Not end up like what?
Roadmap to Recovery report.
Madam Speaker, I don't want to respond to that, but I simply want to say that at the mention of the existence of this committee, I committed to the national population to make the report of those officers available immediately, an unabridged version, regardless of what the report contains. Because this report, Madam Speaker, will not be the political broomstick that they're talking about. It is simply a report where professionals will look at other professionals' protocol and conduct to determine whether, in fact, Trinidad and Tobago is benefiting from best practice within the walls of the hospital. And one of the reasons, Madam Speaker, why I had to do that is because these same colleagues of mine in this House and their friends outside were demanding that the government make decisions inside the hospitals, decisions which are the preserve of the professionals and the professionals only. And I appointed this committee through the authority of the government so that the population can know that what is happening inside the hospital is best practice and fit for purpose arrangements, nothing else.
You no longer?
No.
All right. Member for Carney Central. Question number 6.
Speaker, will the Prime Minister inform the House of any proposed restructuring at both Water and Sewage Authority and the telecommunication services of Trinidad and Tobago and the implications of same for workers' job security?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, with respect to WASA, the Cabinet Subcommittee that was appointed to examine the recommendations contained in the 2020 Subcommittee report for the transformation of the Water and Sewage Authority continues to work with the Board of Commissioners on the finalization of a transformation plan for the authority. These documents exist and are being worked upon. That's underway. With respect to TSTT, Madam Speaker, I understand that on January 17th, 2022, TSTT wrote to its employees' representative inviting them to consultations regarding restructuring of TSTT and a refinement of the business operating model. Like other companies in Trinidad and Tobago, TSTT has been significantly impacted by the economic conditions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. This, coupled with increased consumer adoption of digital applications like WhatsApp and the utilization of communication platforms like Zoom, has seen the steady erosion of traditional voice revenue. In Trinidad and Tobago, fixed voice calling in terms of minutes and calls have declined by 50% over the past 10 years, and mobile voice calling has declined by 20% in the same period, according to the annual TATT market reports. No final determination or decision has yet been made regarding the proposed restructuring. The company has commenced consultation process with the recognized majority unions, and that process is ongoing. The government cannot say anything more at this time that can prejudice the outcome of these decisions, but to implore all concerned to act in the best interests of the organization, the customers and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Cuba South. Question number 7.
Thank you. Will the Prime Minister provide this House with a status report on the government's commitment to commence salary negotiation with the representative trade union?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the cost of wage increases in the public sector has been calculated by the CPO's office, and a submission will be made by the Minister of Finance to Cabinet by the end of this month. It is expected, therefore, that negotiations can properly commence by March 2022. It is also to be noted, Madam Speaker, that throughout the period of economic decline, followed by 2 years of pandemic emergency, and these emergency spending, the government has maintained the payment of all public servants on time, without termination or reduction of remunerations. This has been made possible through the judicious use of overdraft borrowings and withdrawals from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And it's against that background, Madam Speaker, that negotiation for wage increases are to be seen, but the negotiations will take place, will continue, and we hope come to an amicable conclusion, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister, given the recent increases in butter and cheese and milk and chicken and so on, and that workers in the public sector and state enterprises are working on 2012 to 2014 salaries, could you inform us how many negotiations are outstanding and to be settled?
Madam Speaker, I'm sure that my colleague from Cuba South knows that if he wants an answer to that question, he has to give me notice. You can't give me 20 minutes notice and expect me to answer that. If you really want an answer to that question, you file the question with the appropriate notice and you'll get a fulsome answer.
Member for Cuba South.
And Prime Minister, if you had any care and concern for the workers of Trinidad and Tobago, you would be aware of the number of negotiations to be settled.
Member for Cuba South. Member for Cuba South. You well know that is not permitted. So just withdraw your statement and ask a question.
I withdraw, Madam Speaker, but the Prime Minister must display clear and care for people.
But member for Cuba South, you well know when you withdraw, it's not conditional. So just withdraw. If you have a question, you can ask a question and we'll proceed.
I withdraw, Madam.
Thank you so much. Member for Point of Pearl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister provide to the House a definitive date when a decision would be made on Carnival 2022 to allow operators, promoters, and all stakeholders to be able to properly plan for said event?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I addressed this matter last Saturday indicating that we have waited for as long as we could with respect to consideration as to what or whether there will be Carnival or what Carnival would be like until the middle of January. However, I indicated that there are public health protocols in force that will remain in force across Carnival, and any Carnival-like activity will be governed by those protocols. And I indicated, Madam Speaker, that that being so, there will be some kind of Carnival activity which is to be agreed upon by the Carnival fraternity, largely through the guidance of the NCC, the Ministry of Tourism, and the Ministry of Culture. And whatever they come up with, Madam Speaker, for the Carnival season of 2022 must be done within the context of the existing health protocols. So there's no further announcement to be made, Madam Speaker. Those are the conditions for Carnival-like activities. And I went further, even before we finalized what that could be, to indicate that there are certain Carnival activities which will not be permitted simply because they are obviously at variance with the requirements of the pandemic response of 2022. So, Madam Speaker, I can say no more this time.
Member for Naparima.
Speaker, will the Prime Minister inform the House if there exists a use of force policy which includes the use of tear gas as a crowd control measure?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, if the member for Naparima was serious about this question, he would have known that in the police service, there is and has been for the longest while a use of force policy which includes the use of tear gas as a crowd control measure. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Departmental Order 126 of 2019 includes the use of force policy addressing gasless lethal force That's tear gas by guard and emergency branch. The member must know that. And the member knows that. And he's just seeking to engage in misinformation and mischief.
Member for Naparima.
Could the Prime Minister tell us that if this policy takes into consideration the presence of young children, elderly, and passers-by before it is used?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I don't know of any young children who find themselves making decisions to go out and break the law, causing police to fire tear gas at them. If you're concerned about young children that you have, you as a parent must be concerned of not putting your young children in harm's way.
Honourable members, the time for Prime Minister questions is now spent.